Hello. We're now going to complete our lecture on pricing. I'm going to do just a little brief review of the different steps in the case study to illustrate how to determine price. So if you recall, last time we spoke about determining the price variables: demand, contingency cost, fixed, variable, direct, and indirect costs. We looked at this tennis center example and need to then determine what our total operating fixed costs are, as well as the total variable costs. And just do some summing of the different costs so you can find total fixed, total variable, and also your total costs. You then need to determine the cost of 1 unit of production. And in this case, we're first focusing on what is the court price. What is the price that we need in order to just cover our operating expenses? So first we calculate with no contingency costs. Got those values from table 1 from our operating expenses, the fixed and variable costs, and then the demand based on how many hours we are operating. Then want to look at this, also add a contingency cost. In this case, we're going to add 5% contingency costs in order to cover unexpected operating expenses. Got this number then, 0.05 is 5%. Next, we need to determine the program costs for, in this case, we're looking at our youth clinic. So there's obviously various costs associated, fixed and variable. Here is our program budget then. We have our total fixed costs, variable costs, and now we need to determine how much is it going to cost per person. So first we calculate this based on our program costs, adding up the fixed and variable, dividing by 30 to get us $9.85. Again, I got these from table 2, which is my program budget. My total fixed costs of my program, variable costs of my program, and demand, in this case, 30 children. And then I also want to determine a contingency cost, though. So want to include a contingency cost to cover program-related expenses. Could be broken equipment or other such things. So that would bump this up then to $10.85. So this is where we left off in part 1. So next we need to determine the subsidy rate. So the subsidy rate is the percentage of the program, service, or product cost that would be covered by sources other than the customer. So things might be subsidized. In the public sector, the tax dollars might subsidize or cross-subsidization. For example, you might make money on, for example, private swimming lessons, and that is then helping to subsidize, for example, maybe your learn to swim programs where you're maybe not even covering all your costs. Not for profit, you might be using money from fundraising or grants. And in public, again, there's cross-subsidization. You might not be making money on some things, but it's like it gets people to come in the door, where maybe you're charging, making a lot of profit on other products and services. So cross-subsidization then is when you have revenue generated from other programs to offset the expense of a program that's not going to break even. We have to determine the subsidy rate, if we're even going to have one. They're usually based on the type of program that is being offered. And this is especially true in public recreation. So we look at things as it public, merit, or private. So for example, public programs. These are services that are offered to the public at large and benefits everyone. Parks, walking trails. It benefits both users and non-users often, especially when we're looking at municipal recreation. Parks increase the property value. There's the community aesthetics and, overall health of the residents. And also, these types of public services are usually free and totally subsidized by tax dollars. For example, think of all the parks in St. John's and playgrounds. There's no one waiting at the playground charging money, but there's still a cost associated with these. Merit programs, then, are services that directly benefit the people who use them, but also indirectly benefit the community as a whole. For example, an after-school program benefits children and the parents and the community for community health. So often there's like partial cost recovery as well as partial subsidization. I'm going to, again, elaborate on an after-school program example. It might be a merit program because it benefits participants by providing structured programs. They help with homework and a safe place to stay until parents finish their workday. The indirect benefits come from decreases in vandalism or criminal activity, decrease in public funding because parents can take full-time jobs, so it benefits the economy. And last, you might have a private program. So these then are programs that mostly benefit the person who is participating, like a field trip. And these then are usually full cost recovery or profit. These types of programs are not filling a need for the good of the rest of the community. So that means they should be paid by full by the person who is benefiting from them. So when you're actually then looking at how to price your programs, you need to look at the programs that you're offering and classify these programs and services into one of these categories. Is it public, merit, or private? And this then will help you to establish the subsidy rates. I realize I should probably have my next slide to explain this next, but we'll just first go to the calculations. So when you're looking at subsidy rates, it's all the same sorts of values that you're looking at. Variables, price, you're looking at the fixed and variable cost, contingency, demand, and subsidy rate. So in this case, what we're wanting to look at is how should we subsidize our operating expenses for our court fee? We're not going to charge the same court fee for everyone, for all of our programs. We have to look at then the subsidy. So if you have a negative number, subsidy number, the program is making profit. It's not being subsidized. It's negatively subsidized. If S is 0, it means it's breaking even. And if S is a positive number, that means it's subsidized. And you can see then the formula there, you're first looking at adding up your fixed and variable costs, then adding that onto fixed, variable, and contingency costs, dividing by demand, and timesing that by your subsidy rate. A much easier formula, though, is to look at the unit cost and times that by the subsidy rate minus 1. These two formulas produce the same results within a few cents of rounding. I assume in your assignments you'll probably use the easier formula, but I'm just showing you both as that is how it's presented in the textbook. So let's look at our tennis clinic. We have different programs. We have open court time, adult team tennis, youth beginner lessons, teen traveling teen traveling team, and youth intermediate clinic. So in this case, the open court time is viewed as public because it benefits everyone, and it provides, a recreation and health for anyone who wants to be able to do tennis. The adult team tennis is private because it is only benefiting that adults to be participating in this. There's the youth beginner lessons. We're calling that merit program because it's not benefiting, the whole community, but it does provide benefits to both, the community and to the individual. Teen traveling team, well, that's teens who are obviously wanting, a more elite competition, so that's private. It's only really benefiting them. And the youth intermediate clinic is also might be viewed as private as well. Oh, sorry, as public. I have an error on the view there. The youth intermediate clinic should be viewed. The program type should say that it's a public. Oh no, pardon me, it will be private. It is a private program, pardon me. So in this case, it's private. It's benefiting the community. It's benefiting only the individual to learn tennis, but it is about youth. So we're not going to subsidize it, but we're not going to make profit on it either. So we're going to give it a 0% subsidy rate. Where our other one, which is the open court time, is for the greater good, we're going to 100% subsidize that program. The adult team tennis, we're giving that a -25 to be what S will be, the subsidy rate. Negative meaning that we are going to make profit. We're going to make 25% profit on that program. Youth beginner lessons, it has merit. We want to subsidize that because we want, that helps to grow the program. It also helps, youth health and all the good things about recreation and leisure. So we're going to subsidize it by 60%. And finally, the teen traveling team, we're going to make a bit of profit on that because it's a private program. And so it's going to have -20% subsidy rate. So in terms of those different subsidy recoveries, or how you actually go about this, then it means that the public ones, or the open court, has no cost recovery. It's fully subsidized. The adult team tennis would be an enterprise or a profit. Youth beginner lessons, there's some cost recovery, but there's also some subsidy. The teen traveling and enterprise, we're going to make profit. And finally, the youth intermediate clinic will be full recovery, but no subsidy. So now based on all of that, we need to figure out what court price, how much we should charge per hour for the tennis court for each of these programs. The first one, the open tennis court, is really easy. It's 100% subsidized. So that means it's free. We're not going to charge. The adult team tennis is -25%. So the subsidy rate is -0.25. I then take my P, and notice that in this case, my fixed and variable costs that I'm looking at are not my program costs, but my operating costs. So I've gotten these values again from table 1. And I do the math and come up with $69.01. You could also this would be easier, you could do the unit cost. We've already figured out we need $55.28 to charge for the tennis court in order to break even our operating costs. We multiply that by 1.25 because we're making profit. And so we get the 69. Just want to remind you, if you are looking at this through the more complicated formula, you have to remember your bed mass. So the arithmetic order of operations, you always do your brackets first, the math in the brackets, then your exponents, we don't have any here, then our division and multiplication, and finally addition and subtraction. I also just want to point out how here I have 1 minus s. So that's 1 minus negative 0.25. Remember that when you multiply a negative number, the negatives cancel out, so, two negatives. So in this case, I'm going to be adding these together. So it's going to be 1 minus 0.025, which is really then 1 plus 0.25, which is 1.25. I've done the same thing with the other programs here. So here, the youth beginner lessons. You'll see here that the subsidy is 60. So in this case, if you look at the bottom one, the easier formula, P equals unit cost times 1 minus S. We have our unit cost, we have our court price is 55.28 times 1 minus 0.6 because it's a positive number. So therefore it's 1 minus 0.6, which is 0.04. Multiply those together and I get $22.11. So I'm going to charge each of the youth at least $22.11 for a 60% subsidy rate court cost. The teen traveling team, they have a negative 20%. Remember, we're going to make a little profit on these more competitive teens. So in this case, our subsidy rate is negative 0.20. We take our unit cost of 55.28 and multiply it by 1 minus negative 0.02, which means 1 plus 1.2, multiplied by the unit cost to give us $66.34. So that's what we need to charge as our court price for those teens, this teen program. And finally is the Youth Intermediate Clinic. And in this case, it's 0% subsidy rate. Therefore, the operating costs or the unit price with the contingency cost is what you've calculated. So there's no math to do. It's just what we got as the break-even price we needed to charge for the court in order to break even our operating expenses, what we got in 2B. So that was $55.28. So here you can see that when you're looking at an overall organization, you don't actually charge the same operating expenses for each of your programs. It is based on, subsidy and the type of program, whether you're looking at public, private, or merit. And the last step then is we got to figure out what then is the actual price we're charging. So what we need to do is add now the what we need to cover the program costs and what we need to cover the operating costs. So first we're going to just look at the youth clinic. So in this example, you'll note the program budget provided in Table 2 is only for the youth clinic. In this example, we haven't presented a program budget for the adults or the teen traveling, etc. So in this case, we would just and assume here that we're doing contingency costs. We're going to take $55.28, which is what we calculated in step 2B as our break-even operating. And then we're going to add the $10.85, which is the break-even for the for the youth clinic. And we add those up then to get $66.13. And that's because the youth clinic is 0% subsidized. Now, in this case, as I just mentioned to you, I haven't given you all the budgets for all the different ones. But let's just pretend for this example that the budgets are the same, that it actually just costs $10.85 per person to cover all the program expenses for each of these, just hypothetically. So obviously, again, open court time, we're still going to make it free because we have 100% subsidy rate that we've decided philosophically. The adult team tennis is going to be $82.66 because I take my $69.10, which I calculated to be my court price for the adult team tennis, and I then need to figure out what it would be for my program. So let's assume it costs $10.85, but I'm going to make profit on this. So I'm going to be adding a 1.25 subsidy. So I take my 10.85 times 1.25 is $13.56. That's what I have to charge per person to cover my program costs plus an additional 25%. Assuming this was the same budget as the youth clinic. For the youth beginner lessons, it's going to be $23.45. I take the $22.11 I calculated to be my court time that I'm going to charge them based on the 60% subsidy. I then have to figure out my unit cost. Well, assuming it cost $10.85, I'm going to multiply that by 0.4 because I'm subsidizing it by 60 to get $10.45. Add those up to get the actual price I'm going to charge the youth beginner lessons. Teen traveling, very similar to the adult. In this case, I take my court price for the teens, which is $66.34. Then we are going to look at the program cost recovery, but with a 20% subsidy, or negative 20% subsidy, pardon me, because we're going to make profit. So that would mean it would be $13.02 to cover the program cost plus some little bit of profit. Add that with our court time to get us $76.36. And that then is essentially what you'll be doing for all this process for your pricing case study. Lastly, we're just going to talk a little bit about some pricing trends and issues. I'm going to speak a little bit again about subsidies and double taxation, as also about differential pricing. Pricing can be a real sensitive subject for recreation and leisure agencies. Each agency has its own philosophy on cost recovery, who should be charged what, and how to increase revenue and decrease costs. This is based on if you're public, private, or not-for-profit, and it also is very much dependent on the community in which you live and what the needs are of that community. So subsidy rates really can, as I said, can be complex, particularly for public and not-for-profit. It is unrealistic to think that, park and recreation services should all be free. But if all programs and services were free, then the quality and quantity would be limited. But the fees and charges have to be assessed for some programs. And charging fees has limitations. It can obviously eliminate some groups from participating, like low income. It can also sometimes be viewed as double taxation, especially in public, because property taxes are used to fund many of the services. The taxes are used to generate money for the municipal government that is used then to be paying for the parks and recreation. So sometimes people get upset if they're charged very high fees in public because it's viewed as double dipping. I just paid my taxes and you're charging this extra money. that wouldn't be viewed quite as much if it's a private program that's, only benefiting an individual. There are limitations to charging. Obviously said it can eliminate groups. But you can do cross-subsidization, as we've spoken about. So your shifting resources allows for increased service provision for all people. You make profit on elite and private programs in order to then help subsidize and pay for programs that serve the greater good. And as I said, it can be viewed as double taxation because property taxes are used to fund many of the services. This is a little bit inaccurate, as tax dollars are often used to fund public and a portion of merit programs. The rest is funded by fees from those who directly benefit. And this is actually a nice diagram for how often subsidies are looked at. So this cost recovery model illustrates 5 levels of benefits from a community. Community benefit and complete individual benefit. The more of a community benefit a service has, the more it will be subsidized with tax dollars. So, for example, in the textbook, I believe it talks about Denver Parks and Recreation. So, things that benefit the community at the base of this triangle, the basic services, they use up to 20% recovery of direct costs. So the foundation of the agency, and they serve the largest portion of the community. So special events, drop-in facilities. Then things that, the more you go up, benefiting a little bit more the individual, then there's some cost recovery. So usually 20 to 50%. Whereas, the more that it benefits the individual, then you're going up to, a lot of cost recovery, plus probably additional profit. The last thing we'll talk about is differential pricing. So differential pricing is when you're pricing a service differently for different populations based on consumer characteristics, product level, and distribution. So for example, I might do differentiating prices based on customer characteristics, like age, income, or intensity of consumption. So age is one of the most common. For example, we tend to not charge fees to be very high for children and also for seniors. So, if you're on a fixed income or no income at all, you're dependent, we often try to reduce fees. So we differentiate. We make adult pricing to be more. Another would be like student pricing. The intensity of consumption is also important. For example, you might have discounts on buying more admissions. Maybe you go to a drop-in yoga class and it's going to cost you $4. But if you buy 15 tickets ahead of time, it's going to cost you $3.50. So, the more someone uses something, the lower the price. This happens with products too, the larger the quantity you buy, the less the price. Then we can also have product level. So this is, it's about the experience. If it's beginner, intermediate, or advanced. So generally, beginner classes have lower prices than advanced classes. And that has psychological, but it also might be due to other things like the specialization of the instructor or other costs. Then there's distribution. So that could be the location of the program, the seats in the venue, or the time of day. So you might charge less expensive rates or price to participate during times that are not as busy. Hotels do this. Tourism industry does this. I have seen it in some things like private gym memberships as well, or look at the movies, my family only goes to the movies during the day, in the weekday. Why? Because the tickets are not as expensive. And also, the more popular the facility is, will charge more than a less popular location. You might have different sites, and so you're going to charge more money to the one that has more popularity and more customer draw. So for the exam on pricing, you need to be able to identify the recreation and leisure products and service costs to people. That people look at price as monetary, opportunity, effort, and psychological. It's like primarily a multiple choice. Make sure that when you look at the psychology of pricing, that you can identify the different things like price-quality relationship and odd-even pricing. Remember, when I say identify, and understand that really implies multiple choice. In terms of changing prices, again, be able to identify how people experience different things like reference pricing, objective, and subjective pricing. Be able to discuss how people may perceive price changes, like their tolerance zone, and when they would perceive a price to be inexpensive or expensive. And also be able to discuss strategies to aid in the acceptance of price change. Make sure you can identify the different pricing strategies related to marketing. We talked about penetrating pricing, neutral pricing, and skim pricing. I'm not going to have, we have a case study on this. You're not going to need to know all of the steps to figure out pricing for pricing strategy, but make sure you generally understand that for the exam, what the pricing variables are, what a subsidy rate is, etc. And specifically looking at, if it's something public, a merit program, or a, private. So you need to specifically be able to identify the 3 ways that you might allocate indirect costs: the equal share, percentage budget, and time budget. You need to be able to explain how the subsidy rates are different between private merit and public services, and be able to identify that. There's not going to be any math or formulas on the exam for pricing, but that doesn't mean there aren't numbers. I might be asking you to interpret something. I might have still actual numbers on the exam, but it's not going to require you to do calculations. But you still need to understand all of this in order to identify, do a short answer and multiple choice. And finally, make sure you can identify differential pricing based on consumer characteristics, product level, or experience. And there's many different terms that were identified here. I'm not going to have matching of terms on the exam, but obviously, these are terms that you would need to understand in order to be able to do the exam. And I may have definitions in the multiple choice. All right, well, that's it for our pricing. And hopefully now you have an understanding of pricing, as well as to be able, to understand how to begin working on the pricing case study.